Actually, we're excited about it. Thank you for joining everybody. This is the Legacy Project. We're on episode 8, and this is going to be an interesting topic. I labeled it. We normally talk about topics, and this people pleasing man boy thing is real. And I put man boy on there because a lot of you out there that are men or even women, you've seen men that are people pleasing man boys. Where what that means to me is there's part of, I'll say us in general, there's part of us as boys and men that we like to get our way sometimes. We like to we find ways to um find value. We find ways to be accepted. We find ways to feel wanted and needed and seen. And I call it people pleasing man boy because it could be so apparent that we go out of our way to do things that are actually harmful to ourselves. I have a term that says when we're all trying to, when say me, Albert, I'm trying to keep harmony with everybody for the sake of everybody feeling safe and secure and seen, I end up harming myself because I put so much effort in making sure that you're taken care of. Now, there's nothing wrong with it. The difference between leadership, right, and actually doing things for others that may be detrimental for yourself or your integrity or your confidence, or putting that person on a pedestal so that they can be seen and you can just have attention on it. So this subject of people pleasing man boy, for me, has led my life, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But I thought this is an interesting topic for us to talk about because Albert, for those that know my son, and you need to know this, he's a splitting image of me for most of his life up until 21, 22, of what I've seen him dealing with stuff. So that being said, welcome, son, and yeah, glad you're here.
Yeah, this tonight's, like I said, it's gonna hit home because this is one of the reasons why I got to doing the personal discovery and really wanted to learn more about myself is because I noticed this pattern was more than just being of service and leading. It was, like you said, detrimental to myself, where I wasn't filling my cup. I wasn't doing what I needed to do to be fulfilled and also like make sure that everyone else knew who I was. And so a lot of times I think people pleasing now is getting misconstrued with being of service because they feel like they're not doing what is fulfilling to themselves. So that idea of service and actually and leading and people pleasing gets misconstrued, I think. And so I would like today to really not just be about comparing the differences, but sharing how we do and how people pleasing has affected our lives and what we do to make sure we lead in a way that is fulfilling to our life.
Yeah. No, thank you. So, question I'm going to throw at you, and this is going to make you go back a little bit because I think we have different stages where we develop people pleasing. And my people pleasing comes from a safety zone, a security, a way to keep myself safe. If you could remember, is there a moment or is there a scene or maybe a conversation that you remember having as a little boy when you started recognizing that you were doing things to please or to get an answer or to be accepted? Is there something that comes to mind that you could tell us about and kind of share that story with?
I mean, one of the biggest ones is probably right when I realized like and started becoming more aware of like who I was individually. It had to have been around middle school was like one of the first instances where I realized I was starting to become more aware of who I was. And I think it was when I started playing basketball more competitively, because there was more on the line, you know? And so um I just remember a couple of conversations that me and you had where we were learning how I could be more dominant on the basketball court and then how that translated to the day-to-day life when you weren't really directly coaching me, but it was more sideline coaching. And so I think there was where I became more self-conscious because I knew that we could differentiate. those two things, but I didn't know how to directly do it with you and mom and like being my own individual self and then also in the coaching aspect as well because I felt like if I wasn't directly doing a good job, a good performance, then it would lead to me and you not being as close as we could have been. And so that I never used that as a crutch directly, but that was the first kind of instance when I knew I could be more self-aware. And I think that really led into freshman, sophomore year when I didn't develop um, physically. And that's when I become more self-conscious because um, I realized I didn't mature faster. I knew that it was happening, but didn't notice it until I remember one time we did a project. It was like a Romeo and Juliet project where we had to record our voices, and I didn't realize how high pitched my voice was. And so it was freshman year in high school, and um, like I knew everyone else was developing again, but and I was shorter than everyone else when I growing up was always taller than the average person. And I realized my voice was that high. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that that was like that. And so it was like very cringeworthy. So I noticed my persona again, that was a secondary shift, was feeling a little bit inadequate and started to shift who I was because I wasn't who I thought I was. And that also translated in my place of who I was in the high school realm of figuring out like, oh, I need to be a certain stature. I have this high level of status because I was on the basketball team and trying to fit in. And that's just how it feels like with everyone now is trying to feel like you fit a certain mold.
For example, let's say I got a cookie out of the cookie box, and my mom's like, "So who took the cookie?" I'm like, "I don't know. I was the only kid in the house, right?" So I learned how to lie, and what I found though, because when I told the truth, I would get hurt. I actually would get hit. And so I just remember as a little boy learning how to lie, which then led to learning how to manipulate. So if I could, and I remember in business, by the way, this is really pertinent. I remember when I would talk to realtors, I would tell them what they wanted to hear at times so that I would get an outcome that I wanted, which was their business. But I remember feeling really crappy. And then over time, I'm not like blatantly lie, but these little white lies that I could do this. So I found myself over promising and saying yes to way too many things to where the people pleasing became where I was saying yes to so many things that I wasn't saying no enough and I was getting super stressed. So I found that people pleasing for me led to this integrity issue, led to over promising. And at times, even when I was dating, I learned how to people please very easy to date women because it was a way of manipulation. So I know that I have used it as a super bad power, but it started from me being a kid to where if I told the truth, I was going to get hit. So I might as well lie to you and have you not know the answer. So as I've grown into an adult, finally, I call it people pleasing man boy, is I found it also creep into relationships, not of lately, but in the past of where, for example, maybe I don't want to drink one night, but everybody's drinking. And I'm like, well, I might as well just fit in. So let me drink. That was my form of people pleasing. So I wasn't feeling like I was an outsider or this this view of me of like, well, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer. And so all these little insecurities about me would come up because I was giving myself away to people.
And that's very common, right? You just triggered something in me too, where I remembered like even growing up, like I felt like well, Kaylee literally called me the golden child, so that didn't help too. But I also had this like personal um level of achievement since things came so naturally to myself. I put myself on a pedestal, like, oh, I need to have a certain expectation, which led to a lot of great things. And also when I didn't meet those standards with myself, I felt like I had to like manipulate certain situations to feel like that I was in that same perfectionist role too. It seems very common when like parents do it, but what happens when we do it ourselves, I think is something that we can touch on a little bit more too, because you need to have certain standards of yourself, but are you just doing it to please other people or are you doing it for yourself? I think that's the biggest thing that like I'm hearing from you as well.
And this is where the growth comes in. I think this is where, as men, we take responsibility for knowing who we are. I think part of the people pleasing process comes that I've experienced is that again, a context. For me, I was literally groomed, dude. I was literally groomed since I was a little boy to be just like you were at times, right? To be the big brother, make sure my sisters are okay. And then that led to like a mid-adult where everybody's needs came first. You're the big brother. You need to make sure they go first. You need to make sure. So all these needs, now I was groomed how to do that. So over time, I just learned to not even think about myself. And I think that's a lot of problem, a lot of challenge with a lot of young men your age and even my age, is they've never learned how to say, okay, yes, I agree with that. I do need to do those duties, but what am I doing for myself, my sanity? So that, let's say, for example, I know that I'm getting ready for this exam that I'm taking on Saturday, right? And I know tonight I plan Tuesdays and Thursdays to study, yet my boys call me from coming out of town. Hey, let's hang out. Let's go. So am I going to go hang out with my boys, knowing that I'm going to be out to midnight, or am I going to please that because I don't want to disappoint them? Or am I do I need to make sure I say no so that I can plan another day with them, even though I might miss out because the integrity of myself says this test is way more important for me in my life than one night spending fucking around with my friends, knowing that I'm going to get myself into some situations that aren't beneficial for me. So just by having that, knowing myself, what my standards are, what my needs are, knowing that my friends don't really care about that, but if they really did, they would understand. Oh yeah, I totally get it. So I think it's a matter of you as an individual, me as an individual, not only stating our standards, but living our standards and then feeling good with the outcome because we know that it's beneficial for us.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing too is a little bit of discipline in there and also just being integrity and knowing who you are. Because a lot of times when especially in your younger development, I've noticed that when I don't do that, I will sway away from what is actually fulfilling to myself. And so again, that confusion of like, am I being serviceful or am I just giving away my time just to give away my time for what I think is necessary, what the other person needs. And so this gets also convoluted too when you start talking about intimate relationships. And so like when I will the first two relationships that were really impactful to myself, I noticed that like I would self-sabotage in the sense where I would like be very sedentary to spend more quality time with them because I believed that they wanted that for a longer period of time because that was more fulfilling rather than having those a shorter time frame, but actually being intentional, actually being present with them and making sure that they were given what they needed and what I needed in that moment, rather than stretching it out for longer periods of times for the pseudo feeling of connection.
No, as you're saying that, I know for me, one of my biggest, I guess you could say, Achilles has been relationships. And I think it's played a huge part in my relationships of being this people pleasing man boy because I want to do what's best for my partner. But sometimes I do it at the expense of my need or the expense of what I need for myself, right? And again, it could be as simple as overindulging, again, the discipline. And again, if this is where again a lot of men I think get really tripped up is there's the feelings that I want to get, and then there's the disciplines that I need for myself that I know I need to keep in place. And this why I know I would get mixed up is because I didn't have the disciplines. I had the intention, but if you don't have the discipline of doing this, that, or the other, those intentions go out the door because the feeling will override the intention, right? So it's just for me, again, I think what's been great for me just in the last few years is recognizing that I was at times over giving, sacrificing what I knew was right. For example, I'll give you an example. I think the biggest challenge I had with one of the relationships that I had for a long time after I was married to your mom is I people please with money. Okay. I would take her on extravagant vacations. And I remember, I think that what I got in my mind is if I don't spend money on her, if I don't take her to, if I don't wine and dine her or take her to the finest places, or somebody else will. And so I was competing with myself or this other person that didn't exist for the sake of pleasing somebody that really had no appreciation. Because I'm giving you the world, the fuck is you to fight for, right? So for me, it was a huge learning curve that I spent thousands of dollars on this person. We had a great time, but I know for me, it was a huge wake up call that I literally put someone else's, I guess, because the manipulation part was, we had great sex, we had intimacy, we hung out. So I got something in return. I think that's where the toxicity came from, is I was contributing just as much as someone was taking because it was filling both of our needs. Someone's feeling high and mighty and getting all this attention, and I'm feeling like I'm going to get what I need, and so why not? But in the end, it ended up hurting me so bad. I think that's why I went through so much pain, is because I didn't have enough self respect for myself to put boundaries up for myself, not to go over embellish above and beyond what I think I should have.
Well, that's an interesting point too, because then you start diving into, is it really something that you want, or is this form of manipulation that you're dealing with? Is it even who you are really too? And I think that's what gets lost a lot of times is you're not actually yourself when you're doing this too. And so this person is not really you. There might be little snippets in there, you know. And I think that's the biggest thing is like you realize like how much farther down the rabbit hole you go of going away from who you truly are. And so you end up always having to like play this character, play this mask, and it can be really draining on you as well. And I don't think it really hits you until one day it all comes in and hits you at once. And that freight train that you talked about comes after you when you've just been running away from it the entire time.
In your experience with men that you are surrounded with, do you see tendencies that some of these young men do as far as being people pleasing? What kind of scenarios have you seen come up for them?
Well, I mean, just with relationships too, like you just like even just meeting someone. I was telling you I was watching the movie Hitch yesterday too, and it's like the 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 idea of wanting to be this person that you're not comes up. So you want to like feel you're more machismo, feel like you're stronger than who you are, feel like you have this fake it till you make it mentality that's run rampant where there is some positive aspects, but what is the long-term outcome of that, you know? So you'll see people want to like pretend like they have more money that they have, feel like they have they do more regiments that are productive to seem like they are just flaunting. Um, and then just even just on like a business level, people feel like they will gloat more when they feel like it's kind of like when you're interacting with someone that you know doesn't really do what they do, but they have to like just show up more. Like they will talk more about like what they do on a day-to-day basis. And you can just tell that they're just putting it all out there to feel like they are better than who they are. And so it's interesting, like the more you talk about it, is it really something you're doing, or are you just trying to feel like you're just peacocking, you know, just like showing all your feathers?
Have do, do you still have times where you feel like it comes up for you just in your day-to-day life of people pleasing at times?
I would say it's a daily thing like that I have to work on is even even when I'm just walking to the gym, sometimes I'll notice I'm just like presenting myself a certain way and I have to check myself in the mirror. Like, say, hey, like, what am I doing right now? Like, am I training for myself or am I training for that other person to make it look like I'm doing more? And I'm like, okay, well, that's not going to help. That's not going to help me want to be a better person if I'm just looking at someone else to like feel like I'm getting my own self-admiration and start comparing. Like, so it happens all the time in small instances where it's like I'll start doing more ego weight just because it feels like it's better. And it's like, no, that's not beneficial. Like, let me just push myself to the maximum I want to do and actually get something out of this. Because that's when you get hurt at the gym. That's when you start like doing stuff half-fast and the mechanics of everything just go completely different. And so I think just sticking to the fundamentals and like making sure that I am doing the reps properly and not cheating that process that it actually comes back and is more fulfilling to myself.
You want to answer that question that Erica has? Do you have an answer?
Oh, I missed it.
It says,
I don't,
are there any instances people pleasing is a positive? I know my answer.
I would say no. I don't know why I don't see that for some reason.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think it is. I think there's a difference between leading and being of service. To me, that means understanding that you can help the needs of someone else while also not losing yourself in an integral way. That way, like, so what that means is you still honor your values, your codes, while also making so that they are successful in their life. And
No,
so
I
I
think
think that's
that's
a
great.
huge distinction.
Yeah, I think that's great. Eric, I'll give you an example that you may not like. So I'm gonna say it to you. Um, this happened to me. Okay. I'm gonna get really intimate here. Okay. Is on the opposite scale. I remember when Alyssa was a little girl. Alyssa was like 7 months old, and Alyssa's mom wanted to get back together with me. This was like 29 years ago. I know at times he would use the baby as a form of pleasing me so I would spend time with her. And a lot of young parents who are either separated or have kids use their kids as a pawn. It happened to me as a kid as well, where I know that I was in various, would say, rooms because I was the kid so that the adults could get their way with whatever they were doing. So I think just by nature, Grace, you're right. I think it's that by nature, people pleasing by itself means giving to others without integrity of yourself because you're giving away something, you're pleasing people for the sake of your integrity. And I think, again, like you said, Albert, is there's a way to lead and or give service with an outcome that you're not expecting other than to help that individual, but not sacrificing yourself as an individual. And Grace, no, I disagree with you. She says, I think women tend to people please more naturally. I disagree completely. I think men have to wear so many different hats to be accepted in life with women, with work, with employment, that I think we do it just as much as women do, just to have acceptance. Because we're not born with acceptance. Women are born with this acceptance of beauty, of procreating, of us protecting you. You have value. We don't have value. We have to create value for ourselves. That's what I think.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't see the comments, but it's just on that.
Right, is I would say a lot of times I know what you're saying when in terms of people pleasing, like guys really feel like they have to go over and just overcompensate just to feel like they need to be of value, right? And so I don't necessarily there's more or less. I think it's just the way that we go about it is really crucial, is because like you'll see a lot of times like to woo over a woman, there's been like in my early stages, you feel like you have to give the world. And I think that's what's really different.
Yeah.
Um, and even in long-term relationships, you'll see it like you'll start to like feel like you're yourself, and then people naturally will progress and change and shift their values to mold into that relationship. And there's some positives out of that. However, some trade-offs that could occur, and I've felt this, is like you start to lose the things that you enjoy, and you will shift things to be in the name of love, to be in the name of like making sure that they're okay, and you start going to the gym a lot before you date someone, and then give it 6 months and you stop doing some simple things that used to propel you in the right direction. And so I think it's just the biggest thing is just knowing that like when you stick to certain practices of working out, meditating, whatever it is that you do, understanding the reason for it is not just to do it, but how it interacts and intertwines with the rest of your life.
Yeah. I think the big thing for me having to learn was to make sure whatever I'm doing, I'm not just saying yes to everything. Like I would say yes to so many things that then when I wanted to say no to it, now I felt guilty. And I think that's a shame that a lot of us have. People pleasing is I don't want to let you down. So I'd rather give you the world I love. I tell you, but here's what you lose. You lose respect. Because what you'll do is you'll say yes to anything. Like for example, I used to do this all the time with realtors. Like I would say, yeah, I'll get that done without even listening to the problem. And then, or I'd say, yeah, I'll make that appointment just to say yes, but I would never follow. I remember vividly, dude. I had an appointment with an agent that I wanted to meet so bad. I forgot to write it in my calendar. And she called me and I go, I am so sorry. I never saw her again because I overpromised a date knowing that I wasn't going to be there because it wasn't that important to me because I didn't write it down. So it could really, like, people pleasing can really unravel. But where you're going to lose if you don't get a handle on saying no to the things you need to say no to say yes to what you really want to, you'll become everybody's doormat. You won't get respect, and you'll actually lose people in your life because they can't trust what you say. I think that's the biggest thing is like as an adult, is if your word doesn't mean shit because your actions, there's no follow through, you'll never lead people. You'll be a great motivator and salesperson or whatever, but no one will follow you because you haven't learned how to have a standard to say no because you're a yes man to everything. And that's the biggest shift for me. I think 2020 really helped me when I was in solitude, we were in COVID. It really helped me dig deep. Like, why was I so miserable? I was so miserable because I didn't have any self-respect for myself. I was giving the world to everybody, knowing that I was feeling like shit inside. And I think that's for a lot of men, for example, if you're not careful, man, you'll go down this depression because the value you're giving exceeds the value you're giving yourself. And then you'll have this anxiousness because you got to be a certain way in the future. You just don't know how. So what I've learned how to do is to be so present. I'm so present now because I don't overcommit anymore. I don't tell you what you want to hear. I tell you what you need to hear, and then I follow up with what I need to do involved in that. But I'm really cognizant of time, of energy, of respectfulness, and just attentiveness is what I've learned how to do.
Think that's a key thing that you touch on too is getting really good at promising is a huge step. And when people pleasing is like what you mentioned when you were building appointments with people that you wanted to have in your life and not following through. You see this all the time in relationships, and I've done this a lot too, where I will tell my significant other at the time, like I'm this certain person when I'm not this person at all. And so again, going back, you become this like this you start being like two-faced. You're one side, one time you're this side, another time you're this side, and you keep going back and forth, and this inner conflict ends up happening where you have to make a decision on who you are, and then you end up losing yourself in the process. And so getting really good at promising, and I think you touched on it really well, is going to help you in your business, your professional career, your personal life with your friends and your family, and especially your significant other, because when you learn to promise and actually follow through, and then be able to say no with that, there's going to be a lot more power in the words and in instilling confidence in yourself. And I think that's the biggest thing with people pleasing is not trusting yourself. Something I've realized too, to add on with the idea of trust, is I don't believe that trust is me trusting you. I think it's me trusting myself. And I think it gets flipped because we want to push the blame and it comes down to a responsibility and accountability issue is when I say, Dad, I don't trust you, I'm really just pointing at myself in not putting the right efforts of who is in my life and also um, being clear on what those expectations and standards are of what we need to do to thrive as a relation in a relationship.
That's great. And Erica has something that says, how would you advise your kid, raising your kid, how to not be a people pleaser? Depends how old the kid is. Okay, if the kid's under 10 years old, the kids want attention. What I would say, as we're going on a tangent on this, what's really important, I think what separates a people pleasing man, boy, man, or a person, people pleasing person, is what you just said, Albert, is keeping your word. Is if you're doing things for an outcome that you know you can't fulfill, right there, you're already breaking a promise. You're breaking your word. Your word has to mean so much to yourself that if you can't keep the little promises yourself, this is where the self discipline comes in. You can't keep the little promises to yourself, you're never going to keep the big promises. If you can't keep the little promises to your spouse, your significant other, something might maybe you promise your honey that you're going to go, rake the leaves backyard or rake the leaves, and you don't do it, and she keeps asking it over and over and over, right? Then your word doesn't mean anything. How are they going to be able to support you on the little things if you can't support them on the little things either, and you're not going to be able to support them on the big things? So keeping your word, I think, is the main thing in this conversation, is being able to stick by your word. And if you can't, then apologize, have another solution, but don't ignore what you can't fulfill. And I think that's what a lot of people pleasing people do, is they just ignore like it doesn't happen. And all these people that they're doing this to, it's stacking up resentment, it's stacking up non-belief, it's stacking up mistrust. And so now you have this huge wedge because of all of these missed promises, and you can't keep your word. And now nothing you say anybody trusts.
And
Yeah,
that's it. Again, it just adds up. You keep building this snowball that's down the line. And we both gone through this. Like, I mean, you with mom and other relationships, and then me with previous relationships where it's like you don't realize how much it's ingrained in your life because you feel like you're just always going to the next thing over and over and over again. And it just builds up over time. And then there's just so many other things that happen. Resentment builds because you're not yourself. And then you think you don't know how to express yourself to that person because you've been one, telling them how to treat you, and two, you're also telling yourself how to treat you in a certain way. And so, like, again, you just aren't this person that you are. And so it's just really critical. It's critical for myself to really just be upfront as much as I can. And you can still be compassionate while also being yourself. Because then you're gonna, again, it's like it's so cyclical. Like when you're able to be yourself, they're also able to be themselves. So it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy that's beneficial to yourself.
I think that's so good. So, Erica, I love your question again about your kid. I think it's also as a parent, though, right? Albert said it right. Like, it's not about trusting you, it's trusting me. Is like, are you fulfilling your promises as a parent to them? Happens all the time, right? Sweetheart, don't touch that. Sweetheart, don't touch that. Sweetheart, don't touch that. So you're telling this little kid not to touch that, yet there's no consequence of you telling them don't touch that. Or if you do that, you're going to lose lose TV. If you say that 3 times, they know you're not going to take the TV away. So something as these simple little things, acts that we do, they're threats, but there's no consequence to the threats that makes that thing you're saying trustworthy that it's going to happen. So that's a form of people pleasing as well, is parenting to a degree to get an outcome you want with manipulation. And so us as parents have to look at, okay, why is my kid not listening to me? You probably have trained them not to listen to you because your word doesn't mean anything. You tell the kid, hey, if you don't put, whatever threat, you don't put your plate, dirty plates away, you're gonna lose your TV. Well, first of all, it's a stupid threat. Like, really, it's that big of a deal, right? But if you say that 3 or 4 times, your kid knows that you're not going to do that. But if you were to say, look, this is the third time I've asked you, uh, you need to put your dishes away or no TV time. And they don't do it. Now you put those dishes, you make them put dishes away, and there's no TV time, they're going to bed. Now you're sticking to your word, and now you have built a sense of confidence with yourself and authority because you're sticking to what you're saying. This is you can go on a rabbit hole of all kinds of things, but yeah, it can affect everything in your life.
Right. So it just comes down to leadership, I think, is like how are you going to lead your life? Are we going to continue doing the same thing that's happening and we're saying over and over again? Is there going to be something that like, because then it just translates so much to everything else. Is like, for example, specifically with the last relationship I was in, like when I literally felt like I couldn't interact with this person, like every time I said something, it felt like it was going to be bitten back at me. You start, again, you just train yourself over and over again, and it becomes a habit issue. We talked about this last week. What are the habits that you're doing? What is the responsibility and the actions that we're taking? It's all this is coming together now where you see like when one thing doesn't work, the next thing doesn't work, and the next thing doesn't work. And so why not just start with being yourself and then whoever comes into your life is going to come into your life anyways.
So I have a question for you. How now that we're talking about this, how has your ability to, I would say, be more aware of your people pleasing aspects been beneficial to our relationship?
So I guess implementation. I just noticed that me and you just like there's no tension, you know?
There used to be. There's none. There's none. Yeah.
Like I'm just trying to think of the times, like even with like mom and
Sure,
Kaylee, like there's just no tension. Like when there's you can joke around, you can be free. Everyone's like, I'll be like, oh, why can't I do this? Well, it's usually because I'm holding on to something, you know? And so once I just let go and I'm not trying to hurt you, you're not trying to hurt me. Like we're just here just to have a good time and learn. And then if we need to deal with something, we'll deal with it there, you know? And we've shared in the past, but if you have a problem with me, you come to me and say, hey, dude, like, what the fuck's going on? You know, like let's just handle it right here. And then vice versa. Like if there's something going on, we can just talk. And so it just feels like when you can be yourself, everyone else can be themselves. So I think we like I've taken the responsibility and you've taken the responsibility just to show up and be yourself and it makes everything easier. And now we've created this. So it's that's what's happened.
I know for me, one of the big things just being, I talked to you about this today. I mentioned to you, like, I don't like coaching people. Uh, Men are hard to coach because they're so egotistical. They have years and years of ego, but I need to coach them. I need to coach them because it allows me to learn more about myself. It allows me to navigate through things that I'm still navigating through because I have a different perspective now. It's also allowed me to look at all the past failures and see the themes that people have that I can relate to now, that now I can help foster and I can help, lead. That is not people pleasing. That is a journey. That is a purpose. And so, what I've learned about myself with you, and I remember at a time when I was really in shame because of the guilt of that I had with the incident I had when getting put in jail and what happened with all that stuff. I remember at times feeling that I needed to just keep grace with you and do whatever I needed to do, which is people pleasing, making sure I made what you wanted to make, or make sure that I didn't upset the cart because there was so much tension that it was easier because we weren't at a point to talk yet. It was easier just to people please just to get through the 2 hours we were going to spend together than to really enjoy each other's company. And why I laugh when you said there's no tension is because I haven't felt tension between us that was real intense since probably Newport Beach 3 or 4 years ago when we had a little incident. And it wasn't intense 2 years ago when we had the conversation at the pizza place. That was more just unloading, but there hasn't been any tension because you and I have really just, I would say, paraphrase, owned our own misgivings and our own selves into making sure we're showing up as best we can for ourselves, not each other, for ourselves. And the byproduct has obviously this, but also a level of trust and a level of, I would say, even spiritual kindness that's developed between us. I think that's been really fascinating for me to even um, experience with my son, because on here, you're Albert, you're my son, but I don't look at you as lower than me. We're just men talking about stuff.
Yeah, so
I guess the question then that I have is like when you see that this pattern is happening with so many people that you interact with your coaching clients, without giving names, of course, why do you think that it's so hard for people to get out of their people pleasing when it's easier not to?
It the wounding that they're avoiding. Again, maybe they have my wounding where they got their ass kicked or reprimanded or were never seen. So that little dopamine of making sure that I can please you to get an acceptance is way more satisfying now than to me telling you no and dealing with how you might react to me. That little dopamine, that fear is so painful that they're not willing to address it yet.
Mhm.
So a lot of men, specifically men, I've dealt with women as well, but I'm a man, so I'll talk about men, is that pain that they're avoiding is the medicine that they need.
Mhm.
They just don't know how to address it. They don't want to address it because now they have to now be accountable, and they now have to, since they're aware, is now they can't hide it. See, if it's not seen, it doesn't exist. Oh yeah,
Right.
it's just subconsciously, it's unconsciously in your mind, but it does exist. So I think, and then and one word, ego,
Mhm.
ego. I have a new word for ego. You want to know what it is?
What's
It's
up?
edging God out.
Aging got out. Okay.
Because we have a higher conscious telling us what we need to do, but our ego is screaming at us of what we should be doing,
Hmm.
right? And so that ego is part of that person, that thing, that being that's edging God out. That's saying you don't want to go there. You know,
Right.
pain is in there. Let's give them pain. Let's make sure they're happy. Let's make sure their needs. Because then if we give them what they want, they will never ask us what we really want,
Mhm.
and then we don't have to divulge how painful we are.
Hmm.
interesting. Yeah, so it's like,
It's like we're always looking for this thing to push away, push away, push away. And it seems like now, like when we actually are confronted with it, there's something there that we don't want to face. And so I've done it so many times. I feel like I just try to adjust, I call it the elephant in the room as early as possible because when I don't, I've noticed I can't be open with people, even with you sometimes. Like you'll just be like, hey, dude, like what's going on, you know? And it's really I think I'm good at it, but I think I'm not, you know, like it's so easy to tell. Like now that when you go from people pleasing to not and then going back, you just can feel it in your bones a lot easier. And it's just way easier to just like let it all out and do it in a way and share it with people that actually want to help you because it just reaps so many rewards for everyone else. Everyone wants to see the real you anyways. So I've just learned to just do it or else I'm not going to get the same fulfillment out of the interactions that I have. And I want people to have good interactions when I'm with them, you know? So,
Just real quick, Nicole says, Albert, your self-awareness is very healing to hear as a daughter. So thank you, Nicole. I appreciate that. I know I haven't met you yet. Yeah, I'll say this out loud so you hear me, okay? I had to address the pain. Uh, and and Nicole, it is as painful as you think. But here, I want you to hear me loud and clear. behind that pain, there's so much intimacy and love and grace. That pain wants you to address it. That's why it's pain. It's shouting for attention. It's saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. And the more that you avoid it, the smaller it gets, but the more intense it gets. So when you ever get deeper and deeper and deeper, and you really feel it and you want to just, I'm telling you, everybody on here, whatever that pain is, when you decide to really address it and own it, it's not my dad's fault, it's not my mom's fault, it's not the fucking president's fault. What do I need to do to cure this pain? Because I'm going to tell everybody here, if you're not a parent yet, that pain that you're holding on to will get transferred over to your kids. It will get transferred over to the next generation. And now they got to deal with it. The pain I dealt with is 15 generations long. Even the past 3 generations of my dad, my mom, my dad, my grandma. You don't want to know the pain I had to go through with that. So once you figure out that you want to address that pain, that is when everything else opens up. And now you can have conversations with your son and your daughter because there's nothing that I'm holding on to that this young man doesn't need to, won't ask me and I won't tell him. That's what the relief of pain does. So hope you all hear that because I know, I know 6 people on here and all y'all dealing with some sort of pain and you're avoiding it. So, yeah, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, man. Good shit, man. You have anything else to add?
Why not now? Why not deal with it now? Because it's like you just said, that's the reason why I wanted to do this. It's the reason why I started my journey is because I learned from you. If we don't deal with it now, we're gonna feel it in 25 years when I'm 50 years old and gonna have a wife and have kids, and it's gonna be that much harder.
Yeah. I have this thing so people know. So I didn't grow up with a grandfather. Don't know what that is. Have no idea. Now I have a grandmother. She's on my mom's side, Grandma Gloria, and she's my actual guardian angel. There's things I can't say right now that has happened, but I really didn't have any grandparents. So I don't know what that means, right? A lot of you have grandparents. Um, my granddaughter Brielle, I will tell you that if I hadn't made the changes that I made 4 years ago, I'm going to tell it to everybody, she would not be in my life. So think about this, wherever you're at right now, whatever you're at right now, if you don't fix what you're holding on to, 5 years from now, what could you be missing out? Let's say, for example, you're 280 pounds, you have diabetes, and you're 47 years old, and your daughter is 20 years old. Okay. And she has a baby someday. Maybe because you're so overweight and you don't fix yourself, you're not going to be able to save your granddaughter from drowning because you're so fat and you can't swim, you have diabetes. That's how serious this is. I'm saying that because I was that guy. I was that man who lost his family, broke it all up. My older daughter wasn't in my life, and I had to make massive changes for my granddaughter to be in my life today that I didn't know 10 years ago. This is why I'm telling you that pain, it's going to come up at some point in time. Do you want to deal with it 10 years from now? 20 years from now? It's going to be the same pain. So I'm saying that with love because y'all don't know, like, seriously, like, I am so fortunate that I did what I needed to do for myself. And the byproduct was my son coming back in my life, my other 2 daughters coming back in my life. But that was not something I was banking on. I had to do it for me, and the byproduct was the trust that I had to build for myself so that they could see that their dad was safe and trustworthy and respectable now, not the dad they experienced 4, 5, 6, 7 years prior, who was not that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really is just like everything matters. Every small detail matters. It's it's just crazy just looking back on like you said, 10 years ago, just graduated high school, give or take a year. And it's like the level of shifting that's happened from there, just myself and yourself is just it's impeccable. Like it's night and day. Like everything was different, you know. Granted, like I moved away from college, like the actual physical changes, but just the mental clarity, the spiritual clarity, and the willingness to do it is it's all there. And so whether you start today or tomorrow, you're gonna wish you would have started yesterday, but it doesn't matter if you start today. So
Okay. Eric has a question. She says, if you have a friend that feels the need to people please you, how would you talk to them about not doing that?
it's a great question. For me, I don't know how much longer we're gonna go, but I kind of have realized now that like there's certain friends that I know I can talk to and I know I can't talk to. So depending on this friend, maybe you just need to sit down with them, maybe or maybe they'll never be able to. But however you receive things is something you have to be aware of. So if you've noticed you or lash out when people tell you the truth, then maybe that could be a reason why. So that I guess there has to be some self-awareness in here as well. But if you're willing to listen, just say like, hey, the next time you have something coming up that you don't know if I would like to hear, I would love to hear anyways, because it helps me understand you better, and I want to know what the real you are and what you're actually feeling and what your opinion is, so that way we can learn to interact with each other, something along those lines. Because if that's important to you, if their opinion, if their feelings matter to you, then they should be willing to talk with you.
Yeah, so I would answer it this way. It's all about belief systems. Okay. The reason why we people please, I'm saying we, because I'm part of the group, is we have a belief system. We have a belief system that we are not good enough. We have a belief system that we have to do this in order to feel valued. We have to do this in order to feel safe. It's a belief system. It's not true. It's a false reality, but it's a belief system. So if your friend has the need to people please, understand it's not that they can change that right away. They have to go to the belief of why do they think they need to. Remember, the word think means believe. Why do they believe? Why do they think they need to people please? What is the outcome they're searching for? And why do they need to do that? That question. And how long have they been doing it? So these are curious questions you want to ask your friend. They need to ask themselves, Erica, I'm Erica. So why did I do that? Like, what part of me still feels the need to do that? Like, these are serious, curious questions that someone has to ask themselves because under those beliefs, there are three other beliefs. So when you start going down this belief system and start knocking off one by one by one by one, you'll recognize what you're doing is stupid. You're like, that was dumb. Why would I do that for? But it was a belief system that you're holding on to that creates this self-fulfilling prophecy of making sure somebody's needs are above yours. And that's where it just gets all messed up from there.
I mean,
So
it's a problem that we're having right now. It's something
yes.
that's very common because everyone doesn't want to step on another person's toes. And again, if your intention with any relationship is to make sure you support them, love them, listen to them, and there's no intention for harm, asking a question should not be difficult, right? And so like if it just comes out of curiosity, like I want to have friends that allow me to have conversation and questions. Because if there's something I can't ask them, like of course if there's something really personal, I'll be like, hey, can I ask a personal question? Are you open to this in this point in time? There's context to it, right? But we can't ask a question, then there's something else there too, right? So
And I'll leave with this. It really comes down to just what's best for you. Like what is best for you in this situation? Is it putting your what your values are on the side for someone else's needs? That's where you have to check yourself. But again, this is where the self-respect comes from. Self-respect comes from self-respect. Learning how to respect yourself so that you can take care of yourself and you're not doing it for all these reasons. And the bottom line, most of us that have these people pleasing tendencies and we do it is there's a wounding there. There's a belief system. There's things we haven't sifted through. And that is where quote unquote the work comes from is a lot of people we live in this sensitive society where everybody's feelings gets hurt because everybody's needs need to be met. And that's just a false pretense. That's the challenge as well, is we think everybody needs to get met. That's where people pleasing comes from. No, your needs don't supersede my needs, right? They don't. They don't. So it's about being aware of, in my opinion, of the situation, of the container, and making sure that both of our needs can be met in a way that's beneficial for both of us. That is the ideal situation, and then lead along the way. So
you said it perfectly. I love it because it's that's what people pleasing is, right? It's you not me.
yourself, like you don't know if you're able to function. Like if you can't function, you can't be beneficial to the other person. So let's help each other, you know.
yes, sir. Well, listen, that was a good one, dude. Loved it.
Yeah, it
Thank
went a
you
little,
that joined us.
yeah, it went longer than we anticipated, but that means we just had a lot to talk about. So I appreciate everyone for listening. And if you're still listening, we'll be here every Tuesday at 6:30 PST. So we're not going away. We just love the momentum we're building. And every time we have a conversation, I feel like I learn more about my dad, and I think vice versa. So if you have any questions, please let us know. And if there's topics that you would love for us to cover, I mean, we post about this throughout the week. So just chime in anytime. And this is a great conversation to have with your family too. So I challenge anyone to just pose a question and see where it goes, a friend, family, loved one. And you might be surprised what you receive.
All right, brother. Love you, man.
Love you too.
See you guys. Peace out.